Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MPE Summer Week. Please join us in welcoming the chairman of the program for Day 4, Gela Boskovic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed our session on network and security improvements or challenges for today. We're going to continue the conversation with investigating opportunities and innovating on authentication and fraud prevention. And we had a longer conversation about the types of fraud that are popping up and the trends and some of the security measures that are being taken at government, merchant, and consumer levels. And now I'd like to actually talk about how UX fits in there, or customer journey and customer experience in this, in terms of being able to live their lives in the virtual world and consume in the virtual world, but at the same time offering protection for the industry. And to kick off our particular discussion, I would like to invite to stage the Marketing and Innovation Director of Digital Payments at NetCetra, Kurt Schmidt. Kurt, you've got a presentation for us, and the stage is now yours, sir.
Thank you, Gela. Very happy to be here. Was an interesting last panel discussing on the data points, collecting information and connecting the players. I want to mention that we are only around 100 days away from PSD2 strong customer authentication to be in place. There was a try to prolong this period for another 6 months, but EBA declined, and there is a lot, I think, still to do in order to look into this. So I'm pretty happy here to speak about these new types of authentication and fraud prevention. And there is exciting upcoming technologies for this, and I want to give you some insights on what is available and what can really help in getting security and a good user experience at the same time. And the underlying technology in connecting the players, we have seen this in the last session, that this is a very important task, is the EMV3D secure protocol that is connecting the merchants with the issuer and allowing the cardholder to authenticate himself in doing a transaction. And PSD2, as I mentioned, is giving the underlying rules and regulations for the Eurozone countries. And this is an important milestone. And 3D Secure has been around for more than 15 years. But only a few years ago, it has taken a look into new technologies, how to embrace mobile and how to have better flows. And there is the 3DS2 technology stacks that are now upcoming. And they are also required by the schemes and by the regulations to meet all this and to take this authentication to a new standard. So I will speak about this, and today, and we have talked about this previously, there is a lot of problems, and the problems is also partially due to the fact that 3DS in this old protocol, in the times it was invented far before any mobile applications and mobile phones have been invented. There is high abandonment and decline rates when 3DS in this old protocol is used. And before PSD2 strong customer authentication is in effect, you can also refrain from using 3DS, but then you get also significant decline rates once you do not authenticate the user. So, and with all this, we are seeing that there is a lot of friction and customers abandoning a too complicated checkout process. And also comparing when we shop online versus we do point of sale shopping, the fraud rates are much higher, and this is for a cost for the whole industry. And we want to get better standards and better security at the same time with better UX. So this balance in getting better security and better user convenience initially it is a contradiction. But I will give you an outlook to the upcoming technologies that you can achieve both, and you can have good security and good user convenience at the same time. So when we look to transaction security, we want to have at every transaction, we want to have a challenge flow and get the confirmation that this is the right card holder. We want to have a strong registration and enrollment process. Partially, there are enrollment processes. You're getting some letters and PIN codes being sent by snail mail to your home. This is not what I'm thinking of, but there is a burden for the enrollment of the authentication that is there, and there needs to be looked at also that this is secure, but also has a good UX. Merchants want to avoid for taking risks. So therefore they could say, well, I'll challenge every transaction and ask the issuer to validate the consumer. But maybe this is also not the best thing to do because it is, from user experience, it is another burden. And then transaction security, there is upcoming technologies that allow that the card not present technology that we have today for e-commerce will be replaced by a card present like technology where we have cryptograms and secure transactions and have better means to do this. So on the user convenience side, I think what is very important is that we do not want to have artificial burdens to the end user with the challenge flows. We want to have consistency. So there are some rules or thoughts that we only do partially challenge users. So I think consistency is important for a user and ease of the authentication. Therefore, the new standards and the availability of mobile technology, including biometric sensors, I think is a key opportunity for us and driving the user convenience. And then there's also upcoming technologies that we will see that we provide the authentication already at the merchant, and I will speak about this a bit later. So as we have seen, using risk tools is very important to get a lot of data. And I want just not also say that using big data, machine learning, etc. on this, but it is also we need to think about where to collect this data and where it is coming from. And here I would ask really to the merchants that are looking into this to implement the latest standards in these 3DS technologies, because when you use mobile SDKs that collect typically 10-fold more data points from a customer than you would do this when you have old technologies, 3DS1 or browser-based technologies. So in particular cases, there are over 100 data points that are taken if you implement in your mobile application a 3DS SDK. And when you provide more data points, for sure you can do better risk assessment, and then you have more data to drive good decisions. So here, please, to the merchants, don't look what is the minimum standard. Try really to implement and provide as much as possible in order to get a good experience. On this risk-based authentication, I just also want to mention that there's two ways, and one is the authentication and the other one is then the authorization. And the authentication has typically three status, so you can say when there is a low risk, an initial risk assessment, you could say I go for a frictionless experience, or I use some of the PSD2 exemptions and I do not bother the user. And then when you assess a medium risk, you can ask and say, oh, okay, I do want a challenge flow. And then you could have a better security. And once the challenge flow is successful, you say, oh, the authentication has now a higher confidence. Or when you assess a high risk, you can say, in this authentication, I decline. In the authorization, so what is happening when you send a transaction at the issuer, there is only the way to accept or decline this. So here, therefore providing more information at the authentication level that is done, so to say, when you are in the checkout experience is very important. So with PSD2, there's coming a lot of new burdens, or we could think of initial burdens that we need to have a better security, and we need to have the two factors and cannot any longer use whatever, some static passwords, etc. So initially it looks like a burden, but it gives better security, and there is a lot of exemptions the merchants can use in order to have a frictionless flow. So you can rate on the risk rating. You can say for a certain amount of transactions beyond a certain limit, low value transactions, you can exempt. Everything that is around recurring payments, you can exempt. And also there's the possibility that you do some whitelisting. So if you have shopped at the merchant, a customer can whitelist this merchant and then will not be challenged on the future payment. There's also some out of scope ways that are not inside the PSD2 strong customer authentication. For example, if you have one leg out, so either the buyer or the seller is outside of European Union, or it's a merchant-initiated transaction, etc. And another topic I will speak about this is also about the delegation of the authentication and doing the authentication already at the merchant side, which gives really good new opportunities. So what is important now? We have now this less than 100 days or to look into how to comply with the PSD2 strong customer authentication. And at Netcetra, you know, we are a key player. We are providing both solutions, ACS solutions for the issuers, but also solutions, 3DS server, 3DS SDK for the merchants. And we have seen that currently only around 10 to 30%, depending on the country, of transactions that are flowing in now in September, August-September timeframe are 3DS2 transactions. So, and there is really a little time till the end of the year that this should be in effect. And we can help merchants and have set up a program. So here MasterCard did some announcement in some note, and there is a website. Merchants can register and get some payment credentials and can really test all these flows that are necessary. Similar program will be then out by Visa. And we have worked now with the schemes in order to really make this happening and really finally do an end-to-end testing, a flow from a merchant really to an issuer. So please make use of this, because really time is running and you need to comply by the end of the year. So many merchants already knowing their customers, using existing authentication methods for login. And this is a good opportunity, because when you're already knowing the customer and already authenticating the customer at the merchant level, this gives new opportunities. And the new opportunities is that you can either store credentials, PANs, card on file for these merchants. And in addition to storing this card on file, you can also convert this card on file to a token. So there is an upcoming merchant tokenization or e-commerce tokenization that replaces a normal PAN with a token that is assigned to a specific merchant. There is a lot of cool added value to this, and on top features, like you can then push this token from an issuer wallet directly to the merchant. You will see direct card art. But a really good success of this is that you see really an increase in the approval rates. So there have been measurements on this, and there is around 6% and on average increase in approval rate. so to say, comparing a transaction done with a PAN to comparing a transaction done with a token that is specific to a merchant and is secured with a cryptogram. So that is one technology. In the presentation from MasterCard 2 days ago, we have also heard about new standard secure remote commerce, click to pay. And this is also very interesting for merchants because this is what will also help them, for example, to get card on files. Because click to pay, secure remote commerce will be an easy way that card data on the same device will be remembered and can be used for a consequent checkout. I think it's too less time to speak about all this in detail, but this is great technology. It is now live in the US and it will come to Europe next year. And then last but not least, merchants have now also the ability to do the authentication already at their side. And this is the technical terms for this is delegated authentication, but it's rather not delegating because it is doing the transaction or doing the authentication transaction already at the merchant. And then there is a need to prove to the issuer that the authentication has already happened. And the method and the standard for this, and we will hear more from Walter now in the coming half hour, will be a new standard that is, or not a new standard, but now newly applied for 3DS and for this authentication in e-commerce space based on FIDO Alliance. And this is really now a new opportunity and allows a merchant to authenticate the user and then transport this information with 3DS protocol to the scheme and then forward to the issuer. And very big issuers, very big merchants can have bilateral agreements on this to do this. But in order to scale this, I want to highlight that MasterCard and Visa, they have developed delegated authentication programs. They act like an aggregator in the middle. And then you need only to close a contract as a merchant with MasterCard and Visa, and the issuer is typically inside this program and only has an ability to opt out. And this really will give new experiences that you don't need to switch the authentication to an issuer, and you can really have a seamless one-click checkout from a merchant side. So this is really interesting opportunities upcoming. In the sake of the time, that's all from the presentation here. I hope we can discuss some of these topics now in the panel. If you're interested to connect on with me, please use my LinkedIn profile, and I'm happy to connect with you and discuss these topics. Many thanks from my side so far.
Thank you, Kurt. It was a very short but informative glimpse into the future of SCA delivery that's coming in 2021. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And to round out our discussion, I'd like to invite 3 other people to join us, and I will introduce each of them very quickly, but then we'll make the round so they have a moment to give you some context of who they are and what they do. The first of which is Petra Silsby, who is the head of dispute management for PlusCard. Hi, Petra. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to be here.
Great. Just give us a really quick idea of what PlusCard does.
Okay, we're an issuing processor. We're located here in Germany, in the heart of Germany. Our banks are the German savings banks and a few private banks. And yeah, in my role as the head of the fraud and dispute department, I somehow got stuck in PSD2, RTS, and SCA. So that's why I'm here now today.
Fantastic. I call it RTS hell, because it has been quite a challenge to live with it. Welcome. I'd like to also introduce Walter Beisheim, who is the Chief Business Development Officer for Knock Knock. And Walter, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Thanks for the introduction.
Great.
So
give us an idea, of what Knock Knock does.
Yeah, so Knock Knock is the global leader in consumer authentication solutions. We have over 300 million consumers using our solution on 5 continents with banks and mobile network operators. And for merchants, Knock Knock provides an authentication solution that increases approval rates, decreases false positives, and streamlines customer interactions, all while complying with PSD2 SCA requirements and in a completely frictionless manner. Also, Knock Knock has partnered with NetCetera to integrate our capabilities into NetCetera's offering, and it would provide a comprehensive payment solution for merchants from a single source. So that's what we do.
Thanks, Walter. We'll be discussing some of those nuances in terms of 3DS that I know you've been working on. So we'll talk about those in a bit. But last but not least, I'd like to invite a gentleman who leads payment and checkout services for Ikea. So we've got one of the big merchants here to give us a perspective on how UX and payments actually fit into their landscape. Onion Blanchina. Onion, give us an intro and give us an idea of what you have to tackle at Ikea every day.
Thank you very much, Gela. To be precise, I'm payment leader here for Ikea Southeast Europe, covering several countries, both in-store and online payment. So closely cooperating with payment service providers as well as acquiring banks and from merchant side. So I would say that this conference is really a hot topic for me because it's this magic triangle where a lot of activities are happening and are familiar with me. And of course, Ikea, it's globally recognized and well-known brand, customers in our heart, and everything and most everything what we are trying to do is to have the best customer experience. So I'm very grateful to have an opportunity today to join the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Onion. Good to have you here. Let's address the fact that the pandemic has changed the way things are moving or the way we experience the world. We're now living in a virtual space. But it's thrown a bit of a spanner in the work in terms of how we've looked at SCA and the implementation of SCA in that particular looming deadline. We'll talk about this in a bit, but it's really about, since the pandemic has started, e-commerce has taken center stage in fulfilling most of our needs. I'll be honest, I haven't set foot into a shop for the last 6 months. Everything I do is online. And I've been dependent upon that for decades. I've been a big fan of e-commerce for a long time, but things have changed. And what has fundamentally changed is not only the pandemic, the potential exposure and risk for increased fraud because of increased traffic volumes. And now with secure customer authentication, that's also changed the way I interact and how I can actually purchase online or via mobile. So I would like to get an idea of how the pandemic has actually impacted your business when we have this intersection of increase in e-commerce utility and increase in risk. Also, now we've got new regulations that have to be applied. So you're seeing this from different perspectives across the industry, from solution provider to working with the financial institutions to actually working with the end customer. And I'd like to take a quick moment to go around the circle. We'll start with Kurt. Give us an idea how your business at NetCetera has actually changed since the pandemic in terms of being able to provide a proper security authentication solution.
So we have seen that customers that are in the lead of this topic, they are ready for PSD2, and they are well prepared for this. But at the same time, we have seen that, as I mentioned, that on average on our transactions that we see, less than 10% are so far are 3DS2 transactions. So there is still a huge gap, I think, on the merchant side to fill this up and to be ready on this. So issuers we are serving with solutions for strong customer authentication, they are fine. We have seen for sure in the terms of numbers shifts. Travel industry has declined, but other industries have increased. So on average, I think our volume of transactions did not change dramatically or did not decrease over the pandemic. In contrast, there were, so to say, in e-commerce, some increase in transactions. We have also seen increase in transaction in contactless transactions. I think what has suffered, but this is for me a good news, is really cash. So I think we will drive much faster to a digital payment landscape with Corona. We have seen the increase in the limits. The floor limits have been increased. People are more using mobile technology because they can authenticate on the smartphone directly transactions. So we have seen good movements. On the other side, some merchants have suffered from the pandemic. And due to this suffering, I think the time pressure in fulfilling everything on strong customer authentication and integrating everything to be ready by the end of this year, this pressure has increased. So this is what we see.
Thank you. Walter, how are you seeing a rush, or is there been a change in appetite for consuming 3DS technology or 3DS2 technology in a rush to prepare for the pandemic? Was there a spike in your business with this?
Actually, interestingly enough, there has been I would say, a spike in productivity. One curious side effect of the whole situation is that there's less in the office distraction for people trying to get things actually developed and delivered. That's kind of a curious thing that I didn't expect. But aside from that, I would also echo what Kurt said. Our issuer customers continue to move forward, and they continue to address not only delivering in time, but also improving their solutions. Merchants have had a mixed bag in terms of the impact of the pandemic. It really depends on how much of their business is coming from online, but certainly the ones that are doing a lot of e-commerce are seeing a sense of urgency to make sure that their SCA solutions do not disrupt their revenue flows. So I would say that I'm not going to discount the overall distraction associated with the pandemic, but it hasn't ground things to a halt, and particularly with the EBA opinion in June, I don't think people are looking for more breathing room in deployment.
Fair, and that deadline looms sooner rather than later. It's very, very near to the cusp. Petra, what are you seeing in your clients' response and how you're serving them? Has it been different since March?
Yes or no. Well, for us, we did not see overall e-commerce going up. It's gone down because the whole travel and entertainment section was down to zero. What we've seen were a lot of disputes related to COVID-19 and travels that did not take place. But that's another story I really don't want to get into right now. But we used the time wisely. What we did is yes, as Kurt mentioned, and Walter, we as an issuer, we've been pretty much ready with PSD2 for a number of months now. But we used the past month due to the fact that we're in the office or at home in the home office, had no meetings or very little meetings. We looked at our processes, and with the help of MasterCard, we actually work with individual merchants to improve our solution and to help them get a feeling on how well 3DS can actually work, or where we still have areas where we both need to improve. And this has been a fantastic time because we really were able to achieve a lot, and we helped merchants get a better feeling of 3DS, take their fears away. Of course, we can't do that with each and every individual merchants out there, but we had some of the larger ones and some here in Germany, and it's been fantastic to see the result, because overall the 3DS volume is so low that we're still scared of what's going to happen come January. And Kurt was saying it earlier, and I have a plea to all the merchants out there. 3DS 2.0 has fantastic data points, but please use them, fill them, give us the information about the transaction. The more information we have, the better we can decide on whether to challenge or not to challenge. So I'm still a little heartbroken that after so many months of talking about SCA, the traffic is still so low.
Well, SCA has been a challenge across the industry in terms of implementation, where it sits within the customer journey, and when we're mixing in third-party providers, a number of different services, how that also changes, right? We've got an entirely complex system. Onion, I'd like to ask you about how business has changed since the pandemic. What are you seeing? And are you seeing a spike in fraud in particular in IKEA's online presence?
Yes, I have several reflections here. Like some speakers already said, it is, let's say, well known, the fact already that some trends just shifted in one direction, and it's in favor of online business and e-commerce. So we saw that in our businesses, and we really reacted very agile and promptly. So from our side, it was very good, and we know also a lot of companies who reacted promptly and, let's say, do it as it should. However, this, of course, speeded up how I see it, some inevitable processes and decision making, how the business will develop, etc. So everything what was on the track, developing, etc., it's maybe now in the faster track. That's my impression, because instead of gradual, let's say, accommodation to online and e-commerce, it happened, let's say, kind of forced. So this impacted a lot of different businesses. As I said, I think that at least here in the region, we reacted promptly. And if you ask me for the let's say, fraud rate and attempts, we can see, let's say, more attempts, but not more frauds, because at one moment we saw that everybody moved to all customers, all people during the lockdown sessions. It was really incredible that you see that everything in the real world moved online. Now it's a bit more relaxed situation. So in that term, of course, our concentration of activities were online. So the anti-fraud shield, let's say, what we have systemically set up in the company, was reacted promptly. So those are experiences, as I think Kurt mentioned also, for the contactless. We saw in the stores more contactless transactions. So those are very interesting signs that we see that people are, let's say, switching very, very fastly, adopting and switching. Also in some of our regions, it's very interesting. There is expression, cash is king, like in some other countries. So we also saw that people are switching from the cash to the cards, to the contactless card. So as I said, it's just lifted in one moment. That was my impression, not just for us in our business, but as well as others. And as you mentioned, for this preparation for a stronger customer authentication, it's how I see it. It's mostly on the bank side and on the payment service provider to some extent. And my challenge here is that we don't have kind of standardization or unified process. Some of our countries are in the European Union, some of them are not. So we cannot have kind of harmonized and standardized approach. So we need to go ad hoc from country to country, from market to market.
That fragmentation is not just a frustration for you. There's a bit of fragmentation across the EU in terms of delivery and maximum harmonization for that, and we're seeing it in different expressions of SCA and where it sits within the customer journey, which actually brings a different question in terms of how to balance not only regulation, the requirement for SCA, but to ensure that you have the best of breed security measures and that you have the most up-to-date authentication technology in place to manage that in a very quick manner, balancing that out with customer behavior and customer experience. There is an interesting balance to try to hit, and Kurt had a slide on this in terms of security versus customer experience. But how do you practically start to arrive at what actually works in terms of security and risk versus a good customer experience and customer stickiness, and yet also understand that fraud sits in the middle, and there has to be a different level of analytics to understand if it is a fraudulent transaction. So I'm going to open that up to all of you, and first come, first serve in answering this. But let's kick off that discussion around risk and security and user experience and fraud, and how we actually start to unpick all of that together. Petra, I see you nodding your head.
Okay. Yeah.
Please do.
Because
Please do.
that's a very, very, very important topic. And we realized when we started about the whole SCA, you could do a lot of things wrong. You can do some better. Perfect is the challenge. So when we choose an SCA, we made sure we didn't just choose any SCA to comply. We had a heavy focus on our cardholders. What is as frictionless as possible? So we thought we were pretty clever, and we used an app, and we used biometrics pretty easy on, and it was an easy road for the cardholder, but we failed in onboarding at first. And I can only recommend SCA is a journey. Don't just implement it and just leave it there, but keep a close look on it and then adjust your process. So we changed onboarding. 3DS is great. We have a lot of more information now, as I said earlier, so it's a lot easier to make a risk-based decision. And the best SCA is, of course, no SCA. So whenever we can, we use all the exemptions we are allowed to use, with TRR being the strongest. And 3DS 2.0 is just such a big chance now to be even better with our risk decisions. And also, we don't just stop there. We're looking at other ways of authenticating. We're looking into FIDO. We're also talking to merchants about delegated authentication court. You had it on your slide. Some issues may see it differently. It is still an issue with our legal department, whether it's critical outsourcing or not. But our credo is whatever works for the cardholder, we're going to support, because I know the merchants are scared that we sure made a mess here with SCA, but we want to keep the transactions, and we want to keep the customer as much as anybody else does. And that's my message to everybody out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Petra.
I'd like to,
Kurt,
yeah.
And Walter, I think you see it from a vendor or a technology perspective. How do you balance risk versus customer journey? And how does 3DS 2.0, especially in terms of the technology standard, how does that fit in, and does that alleviate some of the pressure in terms of low conversion rates or increase in decline rates, all that sort of challenge?
Yeah, I think what I want to emphasize was what Petra has said, and you need to constantly look into improving the experience, and it is not only at the transaction level. I think the big mistake is to not consider the onboarding. And how do you onboard a card holder in order that that later on can do a strong customer authentication? And I think that is a very important fact, that from the very beginning you have a good and seamless process for this. I think Walter can also explain that technology can help for this, because when you have using some standard technology like FIDO, I think the onboarding is easier because people are already having some of the prerequisites installed. But this is really an important learning. And then for sure, also Petra mentioned this, use the 3DS2 protocol. It's currently really, it's a bit embarrassing that it's not widely adopted so far, but it needs to be. With the mandates from schemes and regulations from PSD2, implement this. Delegated authentication, I think, will come in the future as well. This is another topic that needs to be looked at mainly on the merchant side. This is an opportunity for merchants, and for sure, as Petra has also mentioned, there is some discussion whether this is some outsourcing, but here we see currently that think about the complete flow, all the use cases, also not the sunshine use cases, to give a good user experience. And technology, I think, Walter, you can say something on the upcoming technology for authentication.
Yes, thank you very much, Kurt. Yeah, I guess I would say that, we have a great deal of experience in onboarding, and that comes sort of in two flavors. One is onboarding the new customer with whom you do not have a previous onboarded experience with another approach, or onboarding a customer with whom you're already working with, and having that onboarding experience be as frictionless and acceptable and convenient as possible. But I don't want to go particularly into the onboarding part. I can just say that's something we have a lot of experience in. I want to echo what Petra said, is that authentication and implementation of all the aspects of authentication is a journey. It's not a switch on, right? So it's something that you have to improve. But I would take a little bit of exception with the statement that the best SCA is no SCA. I would say that the best SCA is SCA that happens in such a frictionless manner in the background that it does not compromise the user experience. And we can talk about that a little bit more in depth. But if even with SCA, everyone talks about just MFA. They don't really talk all the time about a lot about non-repudiation. So with non-repudiation, you still have to have the customer acknowledge that they are going to use this instrument for this amount to acquire or purchase this thing, right? So there's got to be an acknowledgement. If you do the SCA in conjunction with that, there's really no additional friction, and that's a very important consideration. And this is what thought has been in the work that we've done together with MasterCard and the other members of EMVCo to define the delegated authentication capabilities, and indeed just the use of FIDO authentication in conjunction with 3DS. So, I think the important thing is that you come up with a solution that doesn't make SCA the boogeyman, that doesn't have you doing what happened over the last 18 months of, complete focus on exemptions and whitelisting and everything we can do to avoid SCA, but find a way to do SCA as a complement that is not going to have the annoyance of things like step up and SMS OTP.
I hate to do this because we're and one of the things that is really of a challenge is we don't have enough time to talk about this particular subject in detail. Unfortunately, we only have a couple of moments left, so I'm going to ask you sort of the wisdom of Solomon question, which is which baby gets cut in half or sacrificed? And I'd like to do a round robin and have you give us a final answer on this in the few minutes that we have remaining. The question is, there's a challenge to strike the balance between fraud prevention, appropriate KYC and strong authentication, and a well-designed customer journey. And perfect doesn't exist. So of these three things, which would you personally compromise on and say not as important as the others? It's a bit of an odd question, but give me the negative. Which do you think can be sacrificed? Kurt, is it going to be fraud prevention, SCA, or customer journey? One word or one answer.
I think for me, customer journey is key. You're winning there or losing there, and the problem is, we haven't discussed this, but there will be challenge.
And we don't have time. We don't have time.
There's challenge. Just one thought on this. Where will be the challenge to all of us on the consumer experience? It will come from the GAFAs. They will show how good customer experience looks like, and we can't do other than having also great user experience. And just one last comment. I think we have now the technology that is coming up: tokenization, strong customer authentication, FIDO technology, delegated authentication, 3DS, SDK, etc., to make it a good user experience and be secure. So I'm a believer that is not mutually exclusive.
All right. I like the way you reworked the question, my friend. Agnian.
If I can take the next one, so I will try to summarize the last two questions. So at Ikea, so risk and safety is really primary for our customers in the payment terms. If you ask my heart and my team heart, customer journey is something what we really want and we really care. So like a Kurt, I really believe that compromise is not needed so we can achieve both. So this is my heart, but ideally, but I really believe that with, as I said, a lot of efforts and continuous work and improvement, it is possible.
So 2 out of 4 have said there is no need to compromise. All right, Petra, give me your take. Is there a compromise?
No, you can have it all. I'm totally convinced. The tools are out there. We just have to use them wisely.
All right, Walter, are we going to make this 4 out of 4?
Yeah, I make that unanimous. Absolutely. I agree with what the others have said, and it's true. You can make it. It is not the boogeyman, but customer experience is number one, right? Merchants' relationship with their customers has to be at the top of the list.
Thank you all. I think it wasn't an intended trick question on my end, but it certainly has been flipped on its head. So I appreciate that. It does actually testify to the fact that there is innovation and technological advances that allow us to really streamline both security and customer experience, as well as mitigate fraud potential. So I think the lesson has been learned, and I know our audience now has a few more people to ask advice from. So my thanks to all of you, Kurt, Petra, Walter, and Agnian. It's been fantastic. To our audience, thank you very much for joining, and the discussion will continue during networking. So I urge you to stick around and take advantage of the networking opportunities. And there is more to come tomorrow. Stay tuned for MPE's Summer Week, all things payment, and certainly all things payment during a crisis, and how we can take advantage of leapfrogging during the crisis, as these experts have testified to. My thanks to you all. It's been an absolute pleasure, and happy networking.
Thank you, Gela. Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Take care.